Maine's science leaders toured facilities on Mount Desert Island today. Will Wagner went there to learn why.
Comprised of educators and CEOs toured the MDI Bio Lab in Jackson Laboratory to see their latest research.
Folks who are visiting our campus are going to have an opportunity to hear from our scientists about some of the work that they are doing in regeneration and aging, so understanding whether or not we can potentially repair damage that occurs to our cells and our organs as we age. So they're hearing about some work that is happening in neurodegeneration here at MDI Bio, specifically looking at ALS and determining whether or not we might be able to potentially intervene in that disease at a much earlier stage.
It comes at a time when a bill is under consideration at the State House that would establish the Maine Life Science Innovation Center, which would serve as a foundation for the industry.
It would help accelerate the growth of this industry, help connect people together, and organize some workforce development. So we're seeing that other states are investing a lot of time and money into similar hubs, and we just see the need for that in Maine. Our industry has been growing very fast over the past decade or two, but we just need a more centralized strategy and some investment to really see it flourish.
They say the tour served as a networking opportunity as well.
I think, what we hope people take away is really just the depth of research that's happening around the state. So they will have the opportunity not only to visit here at MDI Bio Lab, but that they're then going to go on to the Jackson Laboratory, one of the largest research entities in the state. So it's a wonderful opportunity for folks to learn more about what's happening at both of these institutions and to figure out where potential areas of collaboration might be.
Will Wagner, WABI News, Bar Harbor.